Welcome back to your next video. In this tutorial, we'll go ahead and set up our first quote. In the case study I've provided, we have a client called Cola, and we are organizing the Easter advertisement film for this particular client. As you remember, we already set up the Cola as a contact on the system in the previous videos. To set up a quote, go into the business and then quote. Now, there is no real difference between estimate and quote, but in essence, quote is something that really built on the agreed amount of money that we have in budget, and estimate is something that prerequisite. So we are estimating how much it will cost, and we send it to our client for approval. In an example, let's go ahead and raise a new quote. In WorkflowMax, it doesn't matter whatever you raise estimate or the quote. As the system is very flexible, you can always change how you build your client, and you can edit information at any point of time. You can also switch the quote into the estimate if you decide to do so. Let's go ahead and add a new client information here. So we select Cola, and if you haven't set up the client yet, you can easily do it via the shortcut here. And the same goes for the contact. So let's say we have Fiona Bedford as our client, and if you don't have the client yet, you can easily set it up in the contact section here. Now, we don't have a job template for this particular client yet, so we use our flexible template, and then we'll add tasks as we go along. The project is Easter advert 2021, next year, and we are filming the advertisement for BBC channel, and to be completed over Easter time, 31st March 21 hour date. Now, we do have a budget in place, it's £15,000, and we started the project is 1st of January, and we finish project as estimation 31st of March. So we go ahead and set this up, and the timelines will help us to navigate and ensure we are within deadlines of our projects. If you have any explanation, you can also add additional information here. Click Next. So now you can see the quote has been created, and let's have a look at the quote manager. In the quote manager, you have on the left hand side the information about editing quote. So we can also go back and edit information about the quote here. We can also print a quote, and if you decide to print a quote, you can easily select what information do you require to show on this particular quote statement. You can also select different templates. I highly recommend to use a system default template. Now go back to the quote. And then on the option side, you can have a various selections. You can have additional templates, or you can change the quote to the estimate, as I mentioned earlier. You can also add the costs to the admin costs. You can copy or delete the quote. Let's say we can reuse the same quote several times for the same client. We can save a quote as a template, again, to reuse it, or we create a prospect lead from this particular quote for any future projects that are very similar. When we want to change the quote to an estimate, let's say we decided to say yes. As you can see, the information is practically the same. So there are almost no changes to our template, and the calculated price is either fixed or based on the costs. So now we have our quote set up. Let's go ahead and look at the main body of the quote. We have tasks. We can add tasks to actually set up this quote in terms of filming days. For example, we have a few filming days set up for this particular client. Let's add 2 filming days, one on the 2nd and one on the 4th. So we have client meeting, and this will take 8 hours of time. Filming day, and we are charging, let's say, 1,000 for this project. And when you print the quote, not necessarily you need to allocate this task to be shown. You can easily not show this task. We can also add additional tasks that are not billable. For example, we can add admin or not billable task. And we can say it will take 2 hours, speak to the team and discuss the project timetable. And it's not billable, so we can just add it as it is. We can also add additional labels. For example, we can say this is meeting label, so then we can reuse the same label a few times. It'll be easier to find the same label for us. Click Save. And as you can see now, the 2 tasks appear. One is billable and one is not billable task. So you can clearly see the total, and not billable would not be charged. We can also add additional costs if we already know the costs we need to have, but our majority of costs probably would be our HR costs, and we can pre-plan how much is going to be our gross profit margin. If you have any options, you can also add new option here. For example, we have an explanation to enter. That would be cost information from supplier. If we set up any supplier, and then the quantity, unit cost of 50, unit price 300, and we can select supply in this case. So we can also add additional information here. As you remember, we have switched from the quote to an estimate. So my purpose was to show you that really there's not much of a difference. I would like to go back to the quote. So if I would like to go back, I simply go to options and click change estimate to the quote and click yes. So now we successfully created the quote. And in the end of a quote, we decide to either save the draft and print, or we just simply save the draft, or we issue and print and send it to our client, for example, by post or separately by email. We can simply issue the quote. So once we issue the quote, it will appear in our all quotes section as issued. The quote, of course, will expire as we set up in our settings earlier. Let's go ahead and print the quote so you can see how it will look like. And I click print. We'll use the same information as system default. I don't want to show the tasks normally, but in this purpose of just showing the example, I will click yes, and I would like to mark as sent. So as the quote already been sent to client. Let's print. And this is how the quote will look like. So you have your quote number generated by the system, the dates where we need to work on, and we also set up the valid date of this quote to 31st of March 2021. We can set up a week or whatever is applicable to a business. Then we have information about client and also the project name, what we're filming for, and now you can see the tasks here in details. And generally, we don't want the clients to see so much of details, so we want to have what we're actually going to be doing and what the project is, and then the project ends with how much we're going to charge for it. If you have any options, for example, perhaps there are optional items that we need to add, perhaps you already spend money on the project in advance, you can always add additional amounts here. So this is how you raise the quote. And when you finish with the print, you can also send it via email or export it different formats. And then the next section, we're going to look at the jobs for this particular project.